Hello, um, my name is Tedros Markos Tekle, and it's a pleasure to share my experience with you all. So, I am a refugee from Eritrea. It's probably a country you've never heard of, a small country along the Red Sea line, the Red Sea coastal line in East Africa. I came from a society where adverse childhood experiences or trauma can be least understood. Born to an economically disadvantaged family and educated in Eritrea, I was able to co-found a disability-focused weekly radio program in April 2000. In September 2003, I joined the national radio as the first blind journalist in my country, paving the way for others to follow suit. On the morning of January 21st, 2013, I was sitting in my unimposing office, pondering my next article for the only English newspaper in the country. It was around 9:40 a.m. when I heard a rumbling noise of what seemed to me of heavy machinery. Armored vehicles alongside Russia's T-55 tanks had entered into the premises of the Eritrean Ministry of Information, carrying anti-aircraft guns and followed by mechanized infantry. The ministry used to be guarded by the military, and it was no wonder to see different companies of soldiers come and go. Things began to change precipitously. The gates were closed. None of us was allowed to leave the premises. A statement demanding the release of political prisoners and journalists, as well as implementation of the long overdue constitution, which was ratified in May 1997, was read at gunpoint on the local channel. Coup d'etat was already underway. A commander of the mechanized division who managed to reach the gates at the behest of the president to take the wind out of the mutineers' sails collapsed from a revolver bullet. Long story short, the not well thought out mutiny vanished into thin air after a 12-hour impasse. Security forces began to closely watch over the ministry, fingers inculpating at the English staff for allegedly providing up-to-the-minute information during and after the coup attempt to international media outlets had already begun pointing at the few of us. A number of journalists were detained, others fled. With my assistive technology applications removed from office computers, I was under constant surveillance. In April 2013, I left Eritrea for good due to political persecution in connection with my background as a radio and press journalist. As the Eritrean government has a long history of abducting dissenting compatriots from the Sudanese soil, I spent few days there, hidden prior to flying to Ethiopia, where I was screened by the national intelligence of this same country. I was registered with the United Nations Higher Commissioner for Refugees, or UNHCR, for international protection 7 months later. Because my claim was deemed valid for resettlement in June 2014, at which point I officially became a refugee, the UNHCR, per its mandate as declared in its statute, submitted the resettlement registration form to the United States Regional Hub in Nairobi, Kenya. So United States is one of the partner countries that closely work with the UNHCR. After 4 years and 8 months of protracted security screening and taxing life in exile, I was eventually resettled to the United States. I landed O'Hare International Airport on the afternoon of December 19, 2017, jet-lagged from the 23-hour flight. It was supposedly the beginning of a promising future for someone like me who was officially relocated to the United States, while at the same time lost in the dark about the starting point. Resettlement agencies make no exception for refugees with disabilities when it comes to educational and employment or career pathways. In fact, their staff appear to have not taken enough training on how to help refugees with disabilities or people with disabilities to network with the right resources, save the Social Security Administration and the SNAP program. Just months into my arrival, I was in arrears of 3 months' rent, all unawares when my resettlement agency was poised to become oblivious to my housing situation without hinting of what the agency was up to. If it weren't for my friends and a church, I would now be homeless. Besides being a blind refugee, my work experience and educational background has been of little avail in my quest for gainful employment. I was introduced to a program, Partners of Refugees in Illinois Disability Employment, or PRIDE, and joined the second cohort in the final quarter of 2018. Housed at UIC, PRIDE has been doing its best to familiarize participants with federal and state resources, as well as the rights and responsibilities of employees with disabilities, thereby identifying career and educational pathways of dozens of participants. In 2019, I joined the Leadership Education, Neurodevelopmental and Related Disabilities, or LEND Fellowship Program in Illinois. And now I am a master's program fellow at Northeastern Illinois University, a success I ascribe to PRIDE as an active participant and a peer mentor at PRIDE. I have been involved in supervision, translation, and editing of training materials, as well as facilitating interpretation. Let's now talk about some of the challenges I faced at schools. In November 2019, I began taking an IT class at a school here in Chicago. It didn't take long for technical showstoppers to crop up. There were quite serious accessibility issues in the instructional design that couldn't be dealt with in a month or a year. And I had to terminate the agreement so as to join another school. I am now a rehabilitation counseling graduate student at a school that provides disability rehabilitation training in a disability-unfriendly classroom environment. Following are some of the barriers I have been facing in both schools. 1, inaccessible or partially accessible web conferencing applications such as Adobe Connect or GoToMeeting. 2, websites not designed with assistive technology and inclusion in mind. The Students Lab portal on one of the websites was not designed from a keyboard user's point of view, that a screen reader user couldn't access on-screen information. Students were only able to access information using their mice. 3, inaccessible instructional materials and examinations containing charts. I still continue receiving scanned documents and other instructional materials that weren't designed with accessibility in mind. Some of the exams are highly graphic and platform controls are short of accessibility standards. The fourth point is counterintuitive web design that impedes efficiency. A university website is designed in such a complicated way that one finds it hard to sift information through or get the services desired in the jungle. These are just a few of the challenges. Remember, these all are human-made problems. We human beings are making the environment unfriendly to people with disabilities. But what is disability? Let's now briefly talk about disability. The World Health Organization, or WHO, defines disability as any condition of the body or mind, also called an impairment, that makes it difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities, which is activity limitation, and interact with the world around them, which is participation restrictions. Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, defines disability as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more measured life activities. The World Health Organization, or WHO, published the International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health, which is also known as ICF, in 2001, which was ratified by 192 countries, almost all countries around the world. The ICF model provides a standard language for classifying body functions and structures, activity, participation levels, and conditions in the world around us that influence health. This description helps to assess the health, functioning, activities, and factors in the environment that either help or create barriers for people to fully participate in society. Ableism is another important concept. Ableism is discrimination in favor of the able-bodied, be it in school, at work environments, or in social activities. These are all interrelated definitions involving two important concepts. The first one is activity, which is the execution of a task or action by an individual, and the second is participation, which is a person's involvement in a life situation, which are all related to human-made environments. As Sue and Sue puts it well, the greatest barrier to people with disabilities are not physical ones. In fact, unalterable prejudices and stereotypes have been hampering the employability and placeability of people with disabilities in their career pathways. There are a wide variety of disabilities or conditions, and the ADA regulations do not list all of them. Some disabilities are visible, some aren't. Examples of conditions include cancer, diabetes, post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, HIV, autism, cerebral palsy, deafness or hearing loss, blindness or low vision, epilepsy, mobility disabilities such as those requiring to use or the use of a wheelchair or a walker or a cane, intellectual disabilities, major depressive disorder, traumatic brain injury. Let's now talk about inclusion at work. Inclusion at work involves creating reasonable opportunities for gainful employment for people with disabilities, thereby eliminating or reducing factors hindering disability inclusion. One of the major factors working against disability inclusion is the inaccessibility of physical and digital environments at work. What is accessibility? Accessibility is the ability of disabled people to access and efficiently use products, devices, services, or environments. The question then is the physical and digital environment at work accessible to everyone? Are products, devices, services, and/or environments in any organization accessible to, usable, and navigable by everyone? One of the digital spaces is the website. Let's now have a brief look at reasonable accommodations. As dc.gov puts it, the following types of accommodations are defined as reasonable. So reasonable accommodations are basically divided into three. The first of which is no tech, or an accommodation costing little or no money. It can be time, support, and creativity. Example, additional preparation time for an individual, or a color-coded filing system. The second type of accommodation is low-tech. Any accommodation that is technologically simple or unsophisticated and readily available in most offices. Example, replacing a doorknob with an accessible door handle, providing a magnifier, etc. The third is high-tech. This type of reasonable accommodation is the one that uses advanced or sophisticated devices or technology. Example, screen reading software with synthesized speech. Reasonable accommodations often do not cost employers or universities a dime. Issues related to reasonable accommodation can be addressed through partnership with Division of Rehabilitation Services or some universities that specialize in assistive technology. Thank you very much.